Ajoute à la diffusion. Ok, d'accord.
Ah, voilà, là j'entends.
Hey, hello, Emanuelle. How are you today?
I'm good, how are you?
I'm pretty good. I'm pretty good. I'm very sorry about the hiccups, about the technical glitches.
No worries. It wouldn't be a good streaming if we didn't have 5 minutes of like rambling around to find out how it works.
Exactly, fantastic. I don't really know what happened. It seems our connection was lagged off. I'm very sorry for the people who were online, and so nothing basically happened. Welcome to the first Fera Lab debate. As my name is Quentin Aries, I'm the editor-in-chief of Café Babel or Babel International, which is a media NGO coordinating the Sfera network. Sfera is the first European consortium of independent media outlets in Europe, basically for small and medium-sized media outlets. So we are working in seven countries and seven languages with partners all around: Critica Politica in Poland, Street Press in France, El Salto in Spain, VD News in Italy, Propaganda in Greece, 444 in Hungary, Bull Media in Belgium, Bull Media in Belgium, Artifarty in France, and Dynamo in Italy. We are having our first live debate today with, dare I say, one of the persons that on Twitter I think is one of the most striking reporters that have been doing fantastic work over the last year during the war, which is Emanuelle Chaze. Emanuelle, despite being a fantastic reporter, is also, I think, one of the, not the caricature, but the epitome of the European reporter, because you are, if I'm not mistaken, French. You live in Berlin. You work mainly for the Deutsche Welle, which is a German public broadcaster, and France 24, which is the French public broadcaster, both of them related to foreign news. And if I'm not mistaken, you are able to report European news in English, French, German, and Spanish. Did I miss any language?
No, not my report.
Fantastic. Okay, thank you very much for your time. We believe we are recording this live 10 days before the sad anniversary of the invasion against Ukraine, and we thought it was interesting for Sphere audiences, which have been, of course, watching what everyone has been writing and reporting about the war over the last year, just to take stock on where we are. After 1 year, what happened and how we're able to take some kind of a step back to reflect a bit on what happened over the last months and what it means either for either for Ukrainians, either also for us Europeans, because I think a lot of things that has changed in those last years. So first of all, maybe Emanuelle, if I can maybe squeeze you a bit on your reporting in Ukraine. If I'm not mistaken, like when the war broke out, like you were almost already on your way to Kyiv and on your way to report from there. So maybe can you just maybe take a step back and tell us, like, basically in April 2022, what happened for you?
In February, you mean? In
Yeah,
February.
exactly. Yes. Yeah. Yeah.
It's thank you first of all for having me today. So in February 2022, since January, I was really aware of the danger of a full-scale invasion of Ukraine by Russia. It's not necessarily something I had covered before. As a political correspondent, I had covered the Minsk agreements. I knew what was happening. Personally, I had followed the Euromaidan, the Revolution of Dignity. But as a reporter, I hadn't really focused on that. And I was actually on call for Radio France that week, the week of the invasion. I had covered the Munich Security Conference, so I had seen Vitaly Klitschko there calling on European powers to do something, to deliver weapons. And back then it was something, unthinkable. I was really worried. I hadn't slept in days because I studied history, and I was really fearing that we would witness a war in Europe the way we saw the Yugoslavia war as well. Many people said this is the first war on European soil since World War II. No, it's not the case, but of this scale, definitely. So I was on call, and in the middle of the night, my editor called me, and she was like, "It has begun. Be ready." And I will never, ever forget that moment in my life, because I knew what it implied. I knew there would be a war. And you've been following my work, so you know that I work as a migration reporter. And I knew we would see a huge amount of people fleeing and try to go for their safety. So I took 2 days to find a fixer, so the person who will do the translation. And I went to the Polish border with honestly no view of going to Ukraine, because I was thinking, I don't speak Ukrainian, I don't speak Russian, I haven't covered this before. So I spent I went to the border on the Polish side, and I went there for France 24, and I worked there for initially 10 days, and I went back to Berlin, and they just asked me to go back because the situation was still very dire. And I spent in total a month at the border until I caught COVID and went back to Berlin because of that. And this was my first interaction with Ukrainian refugees. And this month at the border, I saw a lot of freelancers just going in, being like, let's go to war. And I was really, I felt strange because I didn't feel that appeal. It was really scary for me. And I felt I was not ready. I felt I had no legitimacy in going. That was really what I thought back then. And I went back to Berlin, and it's Deutsche Welle, which then asked me, would you be interested in going to Ukraine? And I was surprised, but they said, we like what you've been doing in your previous reporting on refugees, and this is why we would like someone like you on the ground. And this is how I went to Ukraine. The first time I crossed the border, I crossed it by foot, going the opposite direction as to what refugees from Ukraine were doing. And I didn't know what to expect. I really didn't know. I didn't know if I would be up to the task. And this is how it started. And that was April 2022.
Okay, thank you for that. We will go back to what you said about the reporters and so on, because I think this is super interesting for audiences to understand how reporters in Europe rediscovered in a lot of ways how to cover conflicts. But I think this may be for a later stage. So you have been several times to Ukraine for different media outlets. You have been, I think, really focusing on the conflict and the consequences of the conflict, whether on the migration front, whether on other side of it. Um, what was for you like the key elements that were the most striking for you in those last months when you were on the ground, especially as you arrived with some fresh eyes, because like you never covered an ongoing conflict before.
So what worried me before going was how I would interact with people, because I didn't know at all. Of course, I knew Ukrainian people, but I had never been to Ukraine before. So I didn't know whether or not I would feel, any connection. Like, you have to be able to interact with the people you talk about. And I just simply didn't know whether I would do well or not. And this really cleared up really quickly. After 2 days in Lviv, I was in love, like, with the country. I found the people very nice. And what I would say back then was striking, and still today to me is unbelievable, is the resilience of people. I know we hear about that a lot, but Ukrainians have that strength. And I don't want to annoy any of them by saying that, because they also don't have a choice. I mean, it's either that or they collapse. But to me, that was absolutely striking, that they were being so resilient. And also what what was striking is how Europhile they are. I mean, this all happens because they want to be they want to join the European Union, because they want to detach themselves from being a colonized country, and they want to join another mentality also, as well as an economic environment that is the European Union. So to me, that what was striking is the consciousness they have of Europe, and sometimes we don't in Western Europe because we were born privileged. I think you and I, we never have to worry about which passport we have. We never have to worry about visas. I don't have a lot of visas in my passport. Well, now I do because of Ukraine. But before, because I travel like in Europe, we have this facility to go to one place from one place to the next, and it just made me realize how I knew it, but you don't know until you see people who don't have this privilege. And this is really what struck me the most when I arrived. Those first few days, this is really what I became aware of.
Okay. And as you did a lot of back and forth between Ukraine and outside of the country, did even if this resilience is very striking and as you can see abroad, but like, did you see like this resilience also maybe as change in a lot, in some ways, like for example, like resilience because at first, okay, the war is happening, so we really have to protect our country, we are in a state of shock, but right now, like maybe this resilience, like the war also has drastically changed. Like first, like there were some armies like arriving in Kiev. Right now, most of the conflicts is in the east. But and you have been, and you are thinking you are doing a monitoring for your Twitter audience, which is very useful on the all the air sirens and the all the grill, like from in every cities where right now like they fear they are getting like missiles or being shelled by the Russian army every day. So did this resilience also change in some ways?
Well, I would say the resolve in defending the country hasn't changed. If anything, it became stronger than ever. And also, this is something I noticed at the beginning. There was a lot of even like people from central Ukraine or western Ukraine, even if they knew what was happening in the east, it had never impacted them the way it had impacted people in Donbass. And so I would say that often, especially at the border, I saw people that weren't coming from the east who were surprised, and they were like, "Why do they do that to us?" There was this state of sideration, and now the resolve in defending the country and in like kicking out the aggressor out of the country, this has strengthened rather than anything else. And often I talk to the people I know on the ground, and I said, aren't you like exhausted by this situation? Don't you ever think that um, uh, you know this is not looking good? And they're like, no, we are going to win. And this resolve and this really faith in the victory, this has only strengthened, and that's something strengthened, sorry, and that is something that amazes me, because they are never discouraged, no matter how dire the situation looks.
One of the interesting also over like 8 million Ukrainians like has crossed the borders to leave Ukraine to go mainly in Poland, but also in Germany, in Czechia, in Italy, and elsewhere. Okay, right now, like some families decided to get back to Ukraine. But right now, like I think, if I'm not mistaken, we have 5 million Ukrainians which are registered as under the EU protection status into the EU territory but come from Ukraine. Uh, have you done some reporting on how the families are also talking to themselves? Because, for example, most of the people who are now right now in Europe are women and children, and their father, brother, dad, friends, like lovers are on the ground. How do you tell the stories about like which can be like very intimate, but also like very troubling on both sides?
Well, it's very, you point out something that is very sad, is that there's a lot of families which are now separated and they never chose that life. They never wanted to leave. And that's something that I really try to bring to an audience abroad, is that you don't want to be a refugee. And actually, no matter where you come from, it's never pleasant. It's not fun to navigate the administration of a country which is not your culture. You don't have the cultural codes, you don't have the language, you're denied working, and you feel helpless. And so you have to imagine that it's mostly women and children or elderly people who come to us, and they live in fear of having bad news from home. What I've found, and also I feel it myself, I experience it myself, when I'm not in Ukraine, I feel really, when there's an air raid alert, and I know like the friends I have there or the colleagues I have there are under this alert, I really feel restless. And when I'm in Kiev, I know where to go for shelter, and I talked about it with a lot of refugees, and they say the same. When they are home, even if it's dangerous, you know that your loved ones are nearby, so this is a reassuring element. But when you're abroad, you have absolutely no grip on what's happening. You're not sharing that experience, no matter how bad the experience is. And so I would say for them it's heart-wrenching to not be together. um, I try, there's something in first aid psychology. You don't ask questions that might trigger someone. So when people tell me the stories, it's them who are telling me, who want to share that. I will try not to say, so what about your wife, or the other way around, what about your husband? Because I know the answer can be he's on the front line, or worse, he's dead. Or I know so many people whose wives are now abroad. They haven't seen their children for a year. Um, they talk. Sometimes it does them good, but I would say how I approach it. I try not to ask first, and I wait for them to tell me. And I've been lucky enough to be able to tell those stories, because I'm very lucky that often they trust me to tell those stories.
Okay, thank you for that. Um, as you already said, like it is the first conflict like you are covering as a reporter. You had a background into migration reporting. Uh, how is it like to cover war? Like
Um,
what kind of advice would you give maybe to young reporters going who want to explore, maybe to go to Ukraine? What kind of, because right now it is dangerous. Like I think like over we several journalists have died, many Ukrainians, but also foreign reporters have passed away or have been killed. How you do protect yourself? How you do change your mentality? How do you change your reporting or prep yourself for that?
I had been in challenging situations before when I was doing Central Mediterranean reporting. You're still in a zone where it's very blurry, when there's not really like any legal framework, etc. So I've been in those situations, which kind of prepared me for the current settings. Like I said earlier, I hadn't planned to go to Ukraine. Not that I didn't want to, but I simply didn't think I would be cut for it, honestly, because it wasn't my specialty. And I saw at the border a lot of freelancers who saw that as a professional opportunity. And when I was sent, I also had colleagues who told me, what a great opportunity. And I really didn't see it like that. I know objectively, pragmatically, I know that it is, but I really fully measured the danger, also the responsibility, because of course, if you're going to be taken more seriously when you do that kind of reporting, but you are also risking your life. You also know that when you're going to such such places, you don't come back in one piece, be it mentally or in worst cases physically. So you have to keep that in mind. No story is worth risking your life or losing your life. So I took a month at the border, reflecting on that border and being like, do I want to go on the other side? And I was undecided. And if Deutsche Welle hadn't called me to go, maybe I would still be wondering. And they sent me. And I don't know how you prepare yourself for it because it was new to me. I'm very lucky to work with newsrooms which don't put any pressure on me to go to dangerous places. I was never asked, please go to Donetsk, please go to Bakhmut. When I was at the front line in February when I went to Kharkiv region, it was being liberated. And this was something I wanted to do. And I assessed the security situation before. Nowhere is really safe in such a place, but you should always consider that you have loved ones at home. They want to see you back. And there's nothing more important than that. I mean, no story is worth just going there unprepared. I was mentioning the freelancers I saw who saw the border and they were like, let's go to Donbass. And no, we don't just go to Donbass. You don't speak Russian? Why are you going? Or if you don't, do you have a translator? What's your insurance plan? Do you have a repatriation plan with that? Do you have all the material? I know it's expensive, but you don't go to those places without the appropriate gear. All those things really have to be thought through, and it's not fun. Like, you see things that are going to impact you for the rest of your life. It's not, I see so many people posting pictures of themselves with like the press gear and the helmet. And the first time I wore it during training, it's the heat training, it's called. I felt the weight of the place, but also the weight of the responsibility that comes with it. It's really not fun. So I think we should never ever like forget the responsibility that comes with going to such places.
Like there was a insane, especially at the beginning of the war, and I think some way it's also back because a lot of people are trying to go back to Ukraine just for the first anniversary, sadly, of this war. Uh, a lot of newsrooms were maybe like not investing enough into the freelancers, or even the own reporters just to get like helmets, to get like protective gear, just even like. Having some course to have a fixer or translator and so on. Like, is it something that also you faced when you were on the ground at first? You think like you were maybe like European newsrooms were a bit under-equipped to cover this war?
In my case, but I can only speak from my own experience, I was very lucky I work with newsroom which invest a lot in security, be it for training or for gear. I never had this issue, be it with France 24 or Deutsche Welle. I know it's not the case for every media, and I'm actually right now I'm in the process of I have relocated to Kiev, so I'm commuting between Berlin and Kiev at the moment, and I'm settling as a freelancer for also other media. And the first thing I've done was to order my own gear, because other newsrooms might not have the gear that I'm used to in bigger ones. And it's an investment. Not every freelancer can afford it. But if you have savings, keep in mind that if you don't have this gear and something happens, you're not going to enjoy the rest of your savings anyway. So for me, it was a very important investment to do. It's really weird to have to take that responsibility as well. Of course, newsrooms should do it, but I have the means to do it, so I would rather ensure that I have all the proper gear. And you know what? If something must happen, it will. It will not prevent you from, getting a shrapnel or something like that. But you have to really take those steps to ensure as much as possible that you stay safe while doing your job, because it is only a job. Even if for many of us it is a passion and we wouldn't do anything else, our lives is still more precious than any job.
Okay, thank you for that. So basically, for the gear, just for the people who don't know, it's just a helmet, like a specific jacket, the bulletproof jacket, maybe something to protect your camera because just in case. Okay, so as you said, like you are commuting between Kiev and Berlin. There is in a lot of European countries some kind of a war fatigue. Uh, did you see, like in the recent weeks or recent months, like this war fatigue has been like very wide, or like people are less interested? Where, for example, when you go back to Berlin to discuss your reporting or to have chat with you, like have you seen like people have basically uh, like the war has become some kind of a normal situation for them and they've been accustomed to, or are people still in a state of shock or very like troubled with the conflict?
Well, to be fair, I like my inner circle is unfortunately mostly journalists, so they are not, they're not tired of the news because that's what we feed on, sadly. So around me, like my first circle, I know there's still interest, and when I talk to my friends who have normal jobs, and fortunately I also have some of them, they do care, they have empathy. What worries me is the amount of people who are educated, and who should know better, who ask me why Ukraine doesn't lay down their arms, the arms, and just decide to concede some territory. And I think, as much as I know that everybody wants peace, I think this is a terrible lack of knowledge about that conflict, because anybody who knows Ukrainians, and who has, you know, studied a little bit what's at stake there, and anybody who's seen really what they had endured, not only this year but prior to that, should understand that there is no way back after the full-scale invasion, after all the concessions that were already made since 2014. Anybody should know that Ukrainians are not going to be willing to give that territory, to give up any territory to Russia. So that worries me more than the war fatigue, because I think most people, especially in Europe, people have been affected in a way they might not have been by other conflicts, because it was closer to home, literally and figuratively. They are not, maybe they are worried, maybe they are tired of sending weapons. They're asking themselves, should we do that? But I think the empathy is continuing towards the Ukrainian people.
Okay, like this is fascinating because this is also, as a reporter, something that I've noticed. It's just like we have been, like myself, I've been a reporter in Brussels for 10 years, and even if Ukraine has been on the agenda of the leaders since the Euromaidan or even before, we always kept the lenses of the Russians just to analyze the conflict. Uh, so this is like super interesting what you said just about like the difficulty it is for us just to learn that the Ukrainians have an history with Europeans way more than they have with Russian to some extent, especially in western part of Ukraine. Uh, like if you go to Lviv and so on, like it has been on the more Polish and German and other things that it has been considered as Russian. So it is interesting to see that. So yeah, I think this is what's something like super interesting to see, like how like even for Western Europeans like us, how difficult it was just to change the lens and just to change the perspective about it. So thank you thank
No,
you for making this point, because I think it's super important for Europeans to see us, but like your who have not had the time to delve into the conflicts and the Ukraine history.
there's something in what you say. I just want to add this thing that I forgot to tell you when you asked me, was there anything that was really striking? And a lot of people I met in Ukraine asked me how Europeans, from the European Union, were seeing Ukrainians. They asked me, how did you think we were before you came? How we perceived outside? And I don't know about you, but I never hear French people or German people or, people from the European Union caring or asking about how they are seen elsewhere. And this curiosity and this humility has also been something that taught me a lot of lessons as well, because as a French person I never asked, even if obviously I'm curious, but I never thought about asking how we perceived as a nation elsewhere, and I thought this was so self-centered, from Western Europe to not care about how we are seeing. And this is something that I learned in Ukraine, is also to change my perspectives and how full of prejudices I also was, even more than I thought I was. It's not nice to find that out about oneself, but I'm very glad I did.
Yeah, like just, and I never been to Ukraine myself, but of course, reporting all about the conflict from Brussels. Like, what is interesting about it is just uh, like we explore, like when you discuss with Ukrainians, because we have a lot of Ukrainians in Brussels who were before the war. We always have to remember, like, the Donbass, one of the was one of the most populous region in 2013. So before, like, there was the beginning of the war. So for the Ukrainians, like, they are at war with Russia since like 2013, not since last year. So I think this is something interesting to. But what I've been trying to no, what I've noticed is just like sometimes how they even speak to themselves. Like, for example, I don't know if I'm pretty sure you noticed it, but I think this is something that been interesting. Just like before Maidan, it was before Maidan in 2013, like, Ukrainians were bilingual by essence and were really like speaking. Most of them were speaking Ukrainians and Russians, even if the language are very different in a lot of manners, but they were still keeping, like, to have like this dual nationality, dual languages. Ukrainian was kind of winning in terms of identity and identity building since the war in the Donbass started 8 years ago, 8 years ago. But right now, like, there is an effort for the Ukrainians, or even people who care about Ukraine, just to really to learn Ukrainian, to say it's not Russian, it's not a dialect, it is as different as French and Spanish can be, if I understood correctly. So it is interesting just to see, like, how even like cultures are changing, like Ukrainians speaking Ukrainians, not Russians. But I think was very striking,
It's
at least for me.
It was also striking for me because, to be honest, I hadn't really thought much about it before. I knew, of course, there was Ukrainian, there was Russian, but I hadn't thought about all that it implied in terms of the construction of one's own identity. And what I witnessed, I know so many Ukrainians who are native Russian speakers, and after the full-scale invasion, they really questioned that. But imagine you and I, we have French as a native language. Imagine from one day to the next, you suddenly realize that you have the language of the aggressor, of someone who is killing you people, as a first language. It's so heartbreaking. And I see so many of the people I know who are trying to switch to Ukrainian because they are fluent as well. But some of them, they use Russian so much that it's very hard for them to just get into the habit of changing. Sometimes I'm learning Ukrainian, so sometimes I'm asking to my colleagues, how do you say that? And he's like, I have the Russian word, but let me think about it, and I'm going to find the Ukrainian one. And I saw, for a report, I was interviewing a couple. He's from Donetsk, she's from Mykolaiv, so they are both native Russian speakers. And they decided together that they would switch to Ukrainian and never speak a word of Russian if they can avoid it. Of course, with their families, relatives, it's going to be hard because some generations, they're not going to change languages now, like your grandparents who always spoke Russian, or even your parents, it might be harder for them. But at home, they did, like, they put post-its everywhere with Ukrainian words. They talk to themselves in Ukrainian. And they were telling me it was quite funny because now they argued, but they argued slower because they need to find, the proper words. And I think if there's one thing on what Vladimir Putin has definitely lost, is that instead of making Russia more influential, he destroyed something that was not even a problem before. Ukrainians were very tolerant. They didn't care about using Russian or Ukrainian, and now it has become a thing that, they also show patriotism by ditching Russian. And this is, I think, one of the largest failures of Vladimir Putin in this war. He has completely discredited the Russian culture in a country where it was actually welcome for a very long time.
Yeah, yeah. Like I think this is really something like we really striking that have been happened for the last year. So as soon as you dive in into the Ukrainian Russian history, like you realize like we missed a lot as Western Europeans, and maybe as French. But when we talk to Italians or Germans, like often they do share the same concern.
I mean, I also say that the culture was welcome, and actually that's a mistake because, of course, the Russian culture or
Of
language
course, yeah,
were brought in by colonialism. But I just meant that before it was being Russian was being spoken, and people didn't have
yeah,
didn't have qualms about using it. And of course now all of that is put into question and seen through the prism of colonialism. So maybe being welcome was definitely not the right
yeah,
term to use. I think now the identity is also defined by the language in a way it wasn't before.
yeah. Yeah, of course, like it is. Yeah, okay. I think our time is almost up. So just before you end up a very long day, because and I'm rather sure that you are going to leave, good to go back to Ukraine soon. Uh, how do you make sense of the last weeks right now? Because we have seen a lot of movements on a lot of levels. We have seen, okay, like Volodymyr Zelensky going to Europe. We have seen, like, and as you know, like someone is based in Berlin, like right now, military equipment is now building up. There is a great fear that right now, either the conflict will last for several months, if not years, which will be very exhausting for the Russians. Right now, like if right now the reports that we've seen on the front line is like it's a I don't want to say it's a butchery, but right now like it's heavy casualties as it was in World War One and World War Two. So I know you are not a fortune teller, but how do you see yourself? How do you see the situation now, and maybe what can we expect next, or what kind of key moments you think are important to watch?
Well, indeed, I cannot predict which way it's going to go. What I would say is that unfortunately, there are heavy casualties, not just on the Russian side, but also on the Ukrainian side. To me, anyway, and any conflict of the kind is a waste of human life, and this is it is terrifying to see what's happening on the front line. What really scares me is that the way to deliver those heavy weapons to Ukraine in a kind of it's like homeopathy. It's little by little. Every time Volodymyr Zelensky asks for something, he has to do so much, legwork to try and first accustom Western powers to the idea that he might be asking for something, and then he gets it, but after months of negotiations. And the problem is that often it comes as just enough for the Ukrainians to just hold on to their positions. And I have the feeling that we are witnessing something we had witnessed in World War One, where it's just this senseless loss of life. And I would say, of course, there's heavy casualties in Russia because they don't seem to hold life worthy of anything. Actually, they just like throw in people barely trained as as a way to overwhelm Ukrainians. I would say the difference is that Ukrainians, they are ready to die for their country, but they do attach a lot of importance to every single life. I would say that to me is the major difference between the two armies. As to how the conflict will evolve, I really don't know. Because right now the situation is very dire around Bakhmut, but also we do not know what will be Vladimir Putin's next move. It has been months we had said, well, he's running out of missiles, he's running out of drones. Believe me, I'm in Ukraine quite often. The missiles are still falling and the drones are still arriving. And now I think there's talks of a factory being built in Russia together with Iran to manufacture more drones. I don't know how much weapons he has in stock. I also don't know what next is going to come from the Russian side. I am worried, but also I think the resolve is strong from Western powers to support Ukraine. I know Ukrainians believe like firmly in their victory. So personally, I just take it a few weeks at a time, and I also don't plan ahead. Like I don't know where I'll be in 6 months' time. I just know there will be, like, I feel there will be offensives. That's what every intelligence report says. That's what any think tank also says. That we're gonna see some change in the spring, but as to which way it will go, I really I'm in a wait and see position as well. I just wish we didn't see that bloodshed happening where it does right now, but those injustices have been happening here and elsewhere as well. So
Okay, I still wanted to end on the uplifting note. It's especially on weekends. It seems you are very fond to sometimes publish tweets of cats and dogs. So willing to go into pet reporting when you go to Ukraine. Uh, is it something that keeps you in some kind of, I don't want to say the good vibes, but at least it keeps you some kind of, helps you just to make sense of it?
well, also, we have to keep in mind that what we share on social media is what we want people to see. So my life is not limited to the moments
Of course, of course, of course, of course.
I share on social media. The animal reporting, I've done some reporting, and then privately, I used to volunteer in a shelter. I volunteered in an animal shelter because at least I couldn't be accused of taking sides, or of going out of my role as a journalist. Although even the animal volunteering caused some issues with some colleagues, because they said, well, people's lives are as important as animals, and what about kids? And I'm like, well, I can't really, like, bring kids to Europe for adoption, nor would I want to. So it was a way, especially after going to a site of mass graves as well in September, going back to something, animals are innocent in that conflict, as in any place. So it is a way to, just do something a bit different on the ground to, just bring relief to some animals. And yeah, cats on Twitter, I know people also like it, and it might lead to some adoptions as well. So I did share some pictures like that. And I will probably, yeah, if you follow my feed, you'll probably get some more animal pictures coming. But I would say also Ukrainians are very, very close to their animals. They really love their pets as well. And even their communication, the communication of the army, they understood very well that it's through their humanity that people connect. So we should also see that, it is a way of showing which kind of person you are. I'm an animal, lover, and you see it if you follow my social media. I'm not ashamed of it, and I don't think it makes me less of a journalist because I show that I care about animals as well. So yeah, more cat pictures to come, I promise.
Fantastic. Thank you very much, Emanuelle, for your time, Pharaohs. Thank you for everyone for staying into this live. Sorry again about the technical hiccups. Sfera will continue to do some shows until the end of March, when we are going to discuss about climate, but also the expectation of young Europeans. So thank you again, Emanuelle, for your time. Good luck for the reporting. Do follow Emanuelle on a Twitter account. What is the name of your Twitter handle?
It's actually Emanuelle Chaze, so just my
Okay,
name, and
exactly.
I'm on Twitter. I'm on Mastodon as well, because we
Yeah.
don't really know what's going to happen with Twitter. But yeah, I'm there. Yeah,
Super.
posting about my
Excellent.
work.
Thank you very much, and have a nice evening, everyone.